A long time ago, I got to this point right after John the Baptist was introduced, what he was wearing, what he looked like, what his ministry looked like, how he was preaching. And then I came to all the different actions that happened during that day when Jesus showed up to be baptized. And because I was including John, it became really confusing. But like I said earlier, Michael Rood's Chronological Gospels helped me understand that instance in John was later on. So between Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it was still very confusing. And I said that I was going to take a break from it because I wanted to get some kind of program that I could use to organize all the different events. And I went on freelance.com. I hired a freelancer who I thought was reasonably priced. I explained it to them, paid half, and waited for weeks to get the program completed. Suffice it to say, they walked off with the first payment and never completed it. So if you are ever on freelance and you need to hire a program designer, do not hire AOI team, and specifically not Shashi. That was this person's name, Shashi. A picture of like a red skiing hood, sunglasses. Just don't hire them, because if it's difficult, they might just walk away with your first payment. Anyway, I looked again through Matthew, Mark, and Luke at this instance, and I made a new timeline, and I'm pretty sure I have it down pat now. Beginning in Matthew chapter 3, and also Mark chapter 1, and also Luke chapter 3. All three instances, all three records in Matthew, Mark, and Luke begin with the multitudes coming from Jerusalem. That's what it says in Matthew. But in Mark and Luke, it just says the multitudes from Judea, or just the multitudes came for baptism. So that's where I'm going to begin. Matthew 3:5. Then went out to Jerusalem and all Judea and all the region round about Jordan, and were baptized of him in Jordan. So all these people from all those places. Mark 1:5 says, and there went out to him all the land of Judea, and they of Jerusalem, and were all baptized of him in the river Jordan. Jerusalem and Judea, whereas Matthew says Jerusalem, Judea, and the region about Jordan. So a little bit more explanation in Matthew. I'll be sure to include that. Luke 3:7. Then said he to the multitude that came forth to be baptized of him, O generation of vipers. So it goes pretty quickly into his sermon, if you will. O generation of vipers. And something to mention is that in Luke, it looks like he's being really harsh to these people. But here in Matthew, it says that immediately after John the Baptist sees the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So verse 7 says, but when he saw many of the Pharisees and Sadducees coming to his baptism, he said to them, O generation of vipers, who has warned you to flee from the wrath to come? So that is definitely going to be included, but this first part is pretty clear. And I think I'm going to start with Matthew, Mark. Luke starts a little differently. Then he said to the multitude that came to be baptized of him. So I'm going to start with Matthew, Mark, because that's, like I said, that's his sermon. And, this is from Mark, and there went out to him all the land of Judea. Matthew then went out to him Jerusalem and all Judea, and there went out to him all the land. I think that's a little better. All the land went out to him. Talking about the people, but the people from the land. It's better than just saying went out to him Jerusalem. I could say Jerusalem went to him, or I could say the land went to him. I think I'll say the land. And there went out to him all the land. So went out to him is both. So I could say and there went out, or I could say then went out. I think I'm going to start with and, because it's not like it's the result of what happened before, although it could be. He was dressed strangely. He was preaching an important message that no one else was preaching. Then went all the people out to him. But he was already preaching, so he was obviously preaching to some people. I think I'll do and. Or I could say and then. I could have both. And then all the people went out to him. And then went out. And then there went out. Okay, because there is in Mark. It's just and then in Matthew. And then there went out. Yeah, I'll do that. So starting with and from Mark. And. Now from Matthew, then, and then there back from Mark, and then there, okay, went out to him, I think is in both. Went out to him, yeah, went out to him is both. Dark red and white. Mark says all the land of Judea and all the rest, and Matthew says Jerusalem and all Judea and all the region. So I'm going to start with all the land, and then I'll go into the names. Mark, all the land of Judea, and they of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem comes next in Matthew, and then it goes back into Judea. And then it goes into all the region round about Jordan. So because I know I want to start with all the land of Judea, I'm going to keep that as the only mention. But Judea is mentioned in both, so I will have them both. What about Luke? Then said he to the multitude that came forth to be baptized of him. It just says multitude. Oh wait, maybe I should put that. Then there went out to him the multitude. I think I saved the multitude for later, because now he's speaking about where the people are coming from. And then when he goes into the speech, I'll say, he said to the multitude. Is the word multitude in any of the others? Nope, it's not. It's just in Luke. So yeah, I'll save that for later. Now I have to mention Jerusalem, because that comes next in Mark. And they of Jerusalem. Matthew just says to him Jerusalem. I already said to him, so I'm going to now put Mark and they of Jerusalem in both, because the word Jerusalem is in both. So even though it's a little out of order, they're both there. I'll mention them both. Mark says, and we're all baptized in the river Jordan. But Matthew does say the region round about Jordan. And they of Jerusalem and all. So now this is from Matthew only. And all the region round about Jordan. And we're baptized of him in Jordan. Mark says, and we're all baptized of him in the river Jordan. That word all is mentioned a lot so far. And then there went out to him all the land of Judea, and they of Jerusalem, and all the region round about Jordan. And then I could put, and we're all baptized of him in the river Jordan. Well, it's mentioned twice in Mark and twice in Matthew. All Judea, all the region round about Jordan. And we're baptized in Matthew, and we're all baptized. I'll just put it, I'll put all 3 times. It's kind of annoying, but it is there. Yeah, I'll just put it. Region round about Jordan, and were. So, and were is both. I'm going to go back to Luke, make sure I'm not missing anything. Then said he to the multitudes that came forth to be baptized. No. Oh, look at that. There's a verse in Luke earlier, and he came into all the country about Jordan. I don't know if I should include that in this. No, I'll leave it, because that's what he's preaching. And this is mentioning who came from where. So this is different. I'll keep it as it is. We're all baptized. Just all baptized, and we're baptized. So just the word all is only from Mark. All baptized of him in the river Jordan. Baptized of him in Jordan. So baptized of him, that's all. Baptized of him in both. And then Mark adds the river of Jordan, whereas Matthew just says Jordan. So the river of. The river of is just Mark. Is this really not in Luke? I find it really hard to believe none of this is mentioned. Yeah, just, okay. Then said he to the multitudes that came forth to be baptized of him. I could have that all repeated later, or I could try and add that in here. No, because then I'd be grabbing baptized of him, putting that in earlier, whereas the earlier part of that verse I'd be putting later. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, after I'm done with this section. Mark, Jordan, comma, confessing their sins, period. Jordan, comma, confessing their sins, period. Okay, that's both. Dark red, white letters. Jordan, confessing their sins.
And what about word-for-word translation? Does word-for-word translation even exist? You know, as I have talked about translation with a lot of different people, I really believe that word-for-word is one of the most unfortunate terms that is used to describe Bible translation. When Bible scholars use the term word for word, they know among themselves that it does not mean that every word in the original is represented by a word in our translations. Nor does it mean that every word that we see in our translations represents a word from the original. But when the average English-speaking Bible reader hears the term word for word, especially Bible readers who do not have direct access to the Hebrew and the Greek, I think the term word for word communicates something to them that simply does not exist in any English version. It goes way beyond the degree of literalness that we're actually able to achieve in any of our translations. If we're going to use the term word for word, we really need to qualify it. For example, the term word for word would allow us to do this. When we translate this particular Hebrew word into the King James, this is how it comes through, all of these different ways. According to Robert Young, there are also 17 idiomatic renderings for a total of 84 different renderings. Now this next Hebrew word is translated all of these different ways, and if you look at the list, you'll see that it includes nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, single words, and multiple word phrases. So if we're going to say that we that we endorse word-for-word translation, we have to realize word-for-word translation does mean that in some cases a single word from the original might be translated dozens of different ways in English, and it might be changed to a noun, a verb, an adjective, an adverb, a single word, or a multiple word phrase. But it works from the other side too. Every time you see the word destroy in the King James Old Testament, it's one of at least 40 different Hebrew words, and there's no way to know for sure which one it is unless you look it up, or unless you have the Hebrew Old Testament memorized. So, if we're going to talk about word for word, we have to realize that a single word in the original could be translated dozens of different ways in English. Also, a single word in English may represent dozens of different words from the original. But it's also true in some cases that a single word in English is not represented by anything at all in some of our English versions. And not only the idiomatic versions, also the literal versions. For example, in the NASB, in Ezekiel 1:7, well, literally it says in Hebrew, the soles of their feet, but the NASB translator simply translated it, their feet. This is not a difference of manuscripts. The words for the soles of are actually in there in the manuscript that the NASB translators translated from, but they decided not to translate them. So they're making a statement about translation here. They are saying that it's not necessary to literally translate every single word from the original in your translation. Also in Ezekiel 1:13, where it says, it looked like the appearance of torches, or it looked like torches. What's the difference? Apparently there is no difference in meaning, and again, the NASB translators decided to leave that out, but it's not only the NASB, every version does it. In Genesis 34:26, literally in Hebrew, it says, Shechem they killed with the edge of the sword. Well, what's the difference between killing someone with the edge of the sword or just killing them with the sword? Apparently there is no difference because the ESV dropped out the edge of. That's a single word in Hebrew, but they let that word drop out. They determined there's no difference between killing someone with the sword or killing them with the edge of the sword. So again, they're making a statement saying this is acceptable translation practice, and I'm sure when they did this, they did it with full assurance in their hearts that they were not violating the solemn warning of Revelation chapter 22, verses 18 and 19, that warns against adding to or taking away from the words of Scripture. They did not interpret that literally to say that they have to translate every single word from the original. They determined that it's okay to sometimes let a word or a phrase drop out. Here's another example in Micah 2:7, where the ESV decided that the word spirit was really figurative, so they decided they didn't really have to literally translate it. And interestingly, the New Living Translation does include a literal rendering of the word spirit. So this is another case where the New Living is actually more literal than the ESV. We as English speakers have been incredibly blessed with a wide variety of Bible versions. We can lay a dozen different Bible versions down side by side and come away with a better understanding of Scripture than someone who always only just reads one version. Of course, in many languages around the world, they have no choice. They only have one version, or they have no versions. Sometimes I think instead of recognizing this as a blessing, it ends up being a curse, and we use it to argue with one another. As a career Bible translator, I'm passionate about helping people understand the truth about translation. And frankly, as I've talked with Christians in the English-speaking world, I've seen that there is a lot of confusion about translation. So I've written this book, One Bible, Many Versions, Are All Translations Created Equal, published by InterVarsity Press. And my prayer is that this book will raise the light level of the average English-speaking Christian, helping them to understand the truth about translation. And I really think that as people understand the truth about translation, they'll be a lot less dogmatic. You know, everyone has their favorite version, and that's perfectly appropriate. It's fine to have a favorite version, but what I don't think is fine is to criticize other versions that may not be your favorite version. Because I can show you many places where your favorite version does all the same things that you might criticize that other version about. If you read this book, you'll see many, many examples. So my prayer is that this book will inject a fresh dose of realism and civility into the whole translation discussion. Thank you very much.